those, you know, in those days, it was really distributed only in specialty stores, in comic book stores. And it seemed like there were a proliferation, a lot of these small stores in every city, enough to support a fairly small comics community. Around the time that Art Spiegelman's Mouse came out, The Watchmen, and I think The Dark Knight, there was suddenly this term called graphic novels, and they were being reviewed in magazines and newspapers. The problem was there were not other great graphic novels to be put in the bookstores. And I think it took a number of years. Oh, okay. So, for example, if someone loved Mouse and went to the bookstore to find another book that was similar to that, there was nothing. You could see a collection of Iron Man comics or Captain American comics that were being called graphic novels, but you couldn't find something on the caliber of Mouse. And I think it took a few maybe one generation of cartoonists who had grown up with books like Mouse before there were new, interesting books to fill the bookstore. And I think perhaps in the last 10 or 15 years in America, it's moved away from the ghetto of the comic store, the comic shop, to the mainstream bookstore. And although the term graphic novel is not my favorite, it at least is a way for people to understand that it's a comic that adults can read. So it's a term that's useful for pointing you into a place in a bookstore where you could find my book and other people were trying to make interesting books. In the early 80s in New York City, I was trying to bring my portfolio of drawings to show to magazines, to try to get commercial work. And the very first issue of Raw was on the newsstands, and I picked it up and was immediately attracted to the look of the magazine. So in the very first issue, there was a small piece of text that said, "We are interested in submissions." So, and there was an address there. I was 2 or 3 blocks from their home, so I walked over, rang the doorbell. After a while, a very, not angry, but very, had to walk 6 flights down. Art Spiegelman answers the door, and what? And I said, "Oh, I'm a cartoonist. I'd like to submit my work." He said, "Send photocopies." So I very diligently made photocopies, sent them through the mail, and received a very nice letter in return, inviting me to come visit them and to bring my work. So it was a matter of sitting with Art Spiegelman and slowly looking through all of my work. And what I noticed especially was that he looked very, very slowly, very carefully. And at one point I started being nervous of, does he understand what I'm trying to do? And so I start explaining, well, in this corner, this is, no, that's against the rules. And after that, I knew I was okay. What was important for me is Art Spiegelman and Françoise Mouly were the first people I had met that really seemed to understand my work. I had been in fine art school and occasionally showed my work to teachers, and there was always this look, this questioning look, and saying, well, continue doing this, it looks okay. But with Art and Francoise, there was an understanding, and that understanding was part of their magazine. And sometimes I say that my real education began while I was working for Raw Magazine. There was always, when I visited, there was always an incredible enthusiasm for new work and work I had never seen. So we would sit at a table with coffee, and cigarettes, and Art would say, "Do you know the work of Joost Zwart?" And I'd go, "No." And so he'd run, get a copy, and I'd go, "Oh my God." Eventually the pile of books would get larger and larger and larger. And so I lived in Philadelphia, but I would drive up in our old car to visit Art and Francoise. And in Philadelphia, I did not have a good job, but by the time I was driving back on the New Jersey Turnpike to Philadelphia, I would feel as though my batteries had been filled, so I could continue as a cartoonist. It was also a place where many artists visited, so I got to know Mark Beyer that you mentioned, Gary Panter, but also European artists, like Jacques Tardy, Joost Zwart, many other cartoonists that I have great admiration for. So it was a center for me to think about comics, to push me forward. I would travel to Europe in the early 80s, so I was always looking for interesting books, and so of course I would find books by Yves Chaland, other people you mentioned, bringing home very, very heavy suitcases filled with books. So that was the connection. Traveling and always looking for something new, and I had an immediate attraction for the next generation after Hergé, or two generations, that were influenced by the traditional Franco-Belgian comics. So that was something I was immediately attracted to. I don't really consider myself in the school of the clear line, although it has a tremendous influence on me. I think my brain was more embedded in the American comics from the 50s and the 60s, a very dark brush line, works that I saw in Harvey Kurtzman's Mad Comics, artists like Bill Elder, Wally Wood. That, I think those were the kinds of lines that were embedded into me that I tried to imitate. That's where I'm always having difficulty with. There's some direct influences, I guess, that I've used in my work, but usually with film and with literature, I can't think of very, very clear direct influences. I know that I've stolen things from Ernest Hemingway. I know I've stolen things from William Burroughs, but as far as an overall influence of structure and storytelling, I can't think of. I know I've assimilated many artists, many filmmakers, many writers, but I can't think of a very direct link. I know I'm always associated with David Lynch, and I'm perfectly happy to have that association. I can't speak about mutual opinions. I met Yves Chaland very briefly in the offices, the editorial offices in Paris. But of course I bought all of his books, sitting on my bookshelf at home. Many of them, because I don't speak French, I was unable to read, but now they've been translated. And now I can enjoy all of his stories, which is great. But there was not that much back and forth with the artists that were working for the French magazines that I knew. And I'm friends with Joost Swart, Mullen, but those are, I guess, the two artists that I've met and know socially. I would say those two from the clear lines. Well, my process has changed. Usually I do anything that works. If I can make note cards sometimes, I can make maps, calendars, sometimes typing a prose version of my story. But normally I just work with notebooks, filling them with notes and revisions of notes. So starting with a huge amount of unedited writing, I slowly distill down to a story structure. When I'm conceiving of a story or writing a story, I'm always thinking about the structure of a book and how you turn a page and you look at both pages. Even though you're supposed to start on the upper left-hand corner and read down, your eye and your brain is scanning that complete story, that complete page. So I think about structuring the stories, the writing with both pages, both with the drawing and with the writing. And when I'm drawing on the actual pages, I usually do a very simple sketch of the structure. And when I'm working on the page, I have transparent paper, tracing paper, and I work very roughly, very open, and continue to put layers and refine, another layer of paper and refine. And eventually, I put the drawing on a light table, and I do a final careful drawing. And the last process is inking with a brush.
À quel moment Cornelius a pris la succession des éditeurs précédents de Charles Burns? Honnêtement, je rien de très intéressant à dire.
C'est pas
passionnant et la mémoire est un peu confuse. Je pense que ça s'est situé dans une période où, comme pour craindre, les éditeurs français ne manifestaient plus vraiment d'intérêt pour lui parce que certains livres s'étaient peut-être pas assez vendus à leur goût et qu'il s'est trouvé là la possibilité d'entrer en contact, de faire un acte commercial. Puisque c'est toujours ça, l'édition. Après, je pense aussi que ça s'est produit à un moment où on avait atteint un niveau technique qui permettait de le solliciter.
I was working on Black Hole, and the French rights were sold by my publisher to another publisher. And I remember seeing the books that Jean-Louis was putting out and thinking, why can't that be my publisher? The reason that I am working with Jean-Louis is because he puts out incredibly beautiful books, and when I see the final product, it is the book that I dreamed of. So I trust his abilities. Beautiful printing, beautiful binding, everything. And also runs a company that has very great artists that I admire, that I am happy to be in the same company with. So that's my reason.